Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's virtual community forum on reimagining public safety. My name is Bernice Maricu North. I serve as co-chair of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. And on behalf of the rest of the task force, I want to thank all of you on this virtual forum, as well as those watching for joining us tonight. So why are we here? Montgomery County, as we're all aware, is rich in its diversity. But when it comes to reimagine public safety, that diversity poses a challenge for us because we are tasked with reimagining public safety with a variety of voices to consider. And in light of the recent events, especially in the last year or so with police-related deaths locally and nationally, our collective vision of public safety has been challenged, if not shattered. And so we're right now trying to pick up the pieces and try to reimagine what public safety really means to all of us in Montgomery County, regardless of background, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. Now, some of the voices you will hear tonight will include, well, a lot of us on the task force. Many of us in the task force, about 43 community members, have been working very hard, weekly, if not bi-weekly or monthly, meeting together virtually to discuss a variety of issues to develop recommendations to the county executive. We've talked about institutional racism and how that plays out in public safety. We looked at police operations to determine whether they're in fact mission focused and focused on racial equity. We've looked at county responses to crisis where the police might not meet that need and where health and social services can come in and step in those situations. And we're also going to be tasked with providing input on a comprehensive audit of the police department that is forthcoming. So a lot of us in this task force are lending our voices on a weekly, if not, bi-weekly or bi-monthly basis to provide some insight and recommendations for the county executive. We also have voices from the community survey that was published last month in November, and you'll hear from Carlean Sturgis, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, as to the results of those survey results. We also are hearing from all of you tonight who are not in the task force that are joining us in the public virtual forum. We want to hear from you as well as to what reimagining public safety means to you and the feedback and recommendations you give us as we develop our own recommendations for the county executive. There are also going to be voices that we will not hear at all through this process and frankly might need such insight on reimagining public safety the most, and that's probably because of the business of their lives or the complexity of their lives, especially in light of COVID-19 pandemic. But nevertheless, all these voices must be heard, analyzed, and respected as we go through the process of trying to reimagine public safety and research and continue to create recommendations for the county executive the recommendations are due in January. So with tonight's event, this is pretty much how it's going to go. We're going to hear from the county executive, Mark Elridge himself, after I finish speaking. He'll provide some opening remarks. Then you'll hear from Carlean Sturgis. As I mentioned earlier, she is going to provide some summary of the survey results that were created after the survey was published last month to the public. And then we're going to hear from all of you tonight who have joined us for this forum to provide impact and suggestions on what we can do to reimagine public safety. We've been working in about 5 areas for our discussion. And first area is 911 311 calls. Second area is police budgets. Third area, police department program and training. Fourth area, alternatives to jail. The fifth area, best practices in crisis response. And you'll hear from, I hope, some of the co-chairs tonight of those focus groups to provide you with a little bit of an update as to what they're working on and what they need from you, the public, to help develop recommendations to the county executive. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the county executive, Mark Elridge, to provide his opening remarks. Thank you.
So I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. It looks like you've crossed the 80-person mark. I'm really impressed that these many people are engaged in continuing to stay involved in this issue. After I got elected, one of the things I was determined to do is to address some of the lingering concerns, the real concerns that people have in the community about policing and the role of police and how they get used and when they get used. And the sense that, there are very different views of policing in the community, and there are very different views of policing even within some of the same communities. But it struck me that there are too many stories about behaviors, actions that many of us would find problematic to be fully comfortable with this. And I think the ensuing events, going back before George Floyd, frankly, led me to feel there was a real need to start the process of evaluating and first of all, hearing from the community. So the summer before last, we had a forum at a high school, had lots and lots of people come out, and we invited them to come and talk about their experiences with the police. And I think for a lot of us, it was eye-opening. It was eye-opening to see those many people come forward with stories. And some of it, was clearly concerning. We had, after Marcus became police chief, we were on the path of starting, a study of, what's the data tell us about our own police force. And we actually have money in the budget, had money in the budget before any of this happened, before COVID, that was going to be used to bring in consultants to work with us to look at some of these questions and ask ourselves, where do we think we need to go with policing in Montgomery County? And this is, sort of I won't say the conclusion of that process, but it's the act we finally decided that we were going to take. We created this task force last summer. We've hired a consulting group. We've asked people to look at everything there is about policing. Look at the recruitment, look at the training, look at everything that happens that goes into the making of a police force. At the same time, one of the things that I think is painfully obvious and is not subject to debate anymore, at least I don't think it should be, is a recognition that over the years, we turned far too much over to the police in terms of social problems. If we had a social problem, it became a police problem. And that's not the best use of the police force. And frankly, it's not an appropriate use of the police force. So drug problems were police problems, even if they didn't involve violence or crime, other than having a drug. Alcohol is a police problem. Homelessness is a police problem. Mental health became a police problem. And they became police problems because we had these problems and we never stood up in our existing institutions or created new institutions that would be able to address these problems in the realm in which they needed to be addressed. So much of this is mental health related, and we never took the steps to take these out of the jurisdiction of the police or out of the primary response of the police and put them into institutions, new organizations that would work with homeless people differently, that would work with alcoholics and the drunks in the street, who would deal with people with other substance abuse issues. And so we're determined to do that. And one of the things I'll say is, regardless of whether or not we find funds in the police department to do this, we need to do these things anyway. We cannot rely on thinking, well, we'll just save enough money here and there that we're going to be able to fund this other stuff. It may well be that funding some of these other things properly are going to require more resources. But if we want to address these problems, we have to make a commitment to be willing to put more resources into solving these problems. And that's part of the work that is being done both, in the conversations here, but also in our own departments as we start to look at other models for handling homelessness and other models for handling folks with mental health issues. And how do we know we have to do it, so we're embarked on that process right now. I want to thank everybody on this Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, its co-chairs, the focus group chairs, all of the participants, including community reps, and our partners on the council, the public school system, the state's attorney's office, the sheriff, MNC, PP's Park Police, Tacoma Park Police, and representatives from the county unions. All of you have a stake in this. All of you can bring things to the table that will help us. So we have a wide breadth of expertise and experience gathered to guide us, and we're being supported by the organization Effective Law Enforcement for All. We know the county can't do this work alone. There's no way we could look back on ourselves internally. And I had some people say, well, you should just do this yourselves. And without meaning to, cast an affront to anyone, but everybody in the police department came up through the police department. And if you're going to look at an organization, you have to have people who aren't in the organization doing that look. I mean, the fact that we're doing this now, not because of an initiative that came out of the police department saying we need to rethink what we do, and this is really community driven, kind of emphasizes the point that we needed to bring in outside partners to help us do the work. Everybody's got a role to play. Everybody has information to share. Everybody has got to talk to us about what it really means to either do policing or experience policing. And then we've got to figure out how we reinvent policing in Montgomery County so that we know that we're doing a better job. ELE4A, which is Effective Law Enforcement for All, has begun an independent audit of the police department, and they'll be conducting racial bias audits that include a review of the department's recruiting, hiring, promotions, evaluations, and trainings. And all these efforts and public outreach should assist us in identifying areas of implicit bias or institutional racism in police policies and practices, and inform collective brainstorming and development of solutions and improvements to address them. And I'll say again here that, in a lot of these issues surrounding mental health and substance abuse issues are not inherently race issues, they're mental health and substance abuse issues. And, we need to look at them and, from that lens, particularly carefully. This task force provides an opportunity to inform the work of the audit. And tonight we hope to collect feedback from the public that continues to inform this initiative and the efforts of the task force and its focus areas. And without further ado, this is our opportunity to hear from you, and I'll come back at the end of this to talk a little bit more. But I'm very anxious to hear what people have to say tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. At this time, I will now begin a presentation of the community input survey that was completed. I will share my screen. And can I get thumbs up or confirmation that you can see my screen? Yep, thumbs up. Okay. Thank you. Oh, let's see. Be helpful if I started at the beginning. Okay, at the beginning. All right. Today, we will be sharing a preliminary summary of some of the information related to the task force focus areas collected from the community survey respondents. Although the survey covers broader ground, today we hope to focus on collecting more information related to these focus group areas and feedback that may be considered by the task force. The electronic survey was made available to the public and was translated into several languages. Within the survey, respondents were able to provide feedback related to the task force's goals. A key highlight of the survey is that over 6,500 respondents participated and shared feedback, generating over 20,000 recorded comments. The survey prompted respondents to consider a range of county services and issues such as addiction, DUI, overdoses, as well as other public safety and law enforcement related topics listed on this table. Respondents were able to rank these topics according to whether they believe the Montgomery County Police Department should have a lead, partnering, backup, or no role in each of the noted county services or issues. Overall, respondents felt the MCPD should have a lead role in the areas in blue, including homicide, violent crime, and weapons violations, among other topics. When considering topics where MCPD should work in partnership with other service providers, community outreach and National Night Out received a high rate of selection from respondents. Other topics, including child abuse and domestic violence, had mixed responses. For example, 41% of respondents felt that MCPD should have a lead role in child abuse, while another 46% noted a partnering role. And looking at domestic violence, 48% said MCPD should have a lead role, and 40% felt the MCPD should partner with other service providers. This table highlights other topics where there were also mixed responses on the role of MCPD, which included homelessness, addiction, and mental health response. When looking at the role of MCPD for homelessness, 9% of respondents noted the department should have a lead role in homelessness, whereas 28% said a partnering role, while 32% as backup and 31% felt the MCPD should have no role in homelessness. Mental health response had more mixed responses. For example, 15% of respondents felt the MCPD should have a lead role in mental health response, while another 39% noted a partnering role, 24% said MCPD should have a backup role, and 21% felt the MCPD should not be included in mental health response. For most of the services and issues identified in the survey prompts, respondents noted some role for MCPD. The task force focus areas align with many of these topics, and its focus groups are considering the range of ways to work on these services and issues while considering what role the police department and other providers in Montgomery County should have. Survey respondents also considered areas where funding may be reallocated from the police department to other areas within county. Top priorities noted by respondents were divided across topics including health and human services, education, housing, fire and rescue, transportation, and corrections and courts. 28% of the respondents did not select an area of priority to reallocate MCPD funds, noting that they would not like to take funding away from the police department as a priority. A summary of the demographic data provided by respondents showed a broad range of survey participation, including in stated gender, age, and race. We intend to compare summary demographic information provided by the respondents with available data on county residents as a comparison. As you see here, approximately 17% of those who responded did not report race or ethnicity. We plan to continue to summarize and analyze all survey responses and will provide a final report of the overall survey to the public in the coming weeks. Tonight, we are interested to add to our understanding in these focus areas. collect valuable feedback for the task force, and hear from you, the public. So that concludes my presentation for tonight. I will stop sharing, and Bernice and Mark, we can pivot to the discussion portion.
Okay, well, I'm Mark Mauer. I'm the other co-chair of the task force along with Bernice. And how we'd like to use most of our time this evening now is to hear from you, your ideas, your questions, your recommendations for how we should approach public safety. Bernice has provided you with an overview of the 5 focus areas that we're looking at. And we're going to ask one of the co-chairs in each of those areas to present a very brief overview of the issues that they're looking at. Let me say, at any point, we want to field your questions. So through the chat box, please post your questions, comments. If you'd like to direct them to a particular person, you may say so. Otherwise, we'll field those to the appropriate person as we can. So just do that into the chat box. So let's do an overview of the focus groups. The first one is how the county currently handles 911 and 311 calls. I'm not sure who is our representative who's going to be helping us with that.
I do see Ermiyas and Marco on the call, so if either one of them can jump in.
Marco, do you want to go ahead?
Marco, are you here?
He is here, but I guess for the...
Okay, yeah, sorry. Hello?
Muted. Excellent.
Sorry. I can go, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just a brief 30-second update.
Sure. So my name is Marco Rivera-Oben. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Focus Group 1 of the task force, 911 and 311. Just a quick overview of what we're looking into is we are looking into basically how to recommend any differences that we can take on 911 calls, whether police need to respond to certain types of calls. Also with 311, we're looking to see what are the biggest issues that county residents are having with 311. So we're looking into the community survey, which Carlean kind of overviewed. We got the Excel sheet and we're reviewing that, and we've met a couple times. So we're just any 301 or 911 recommendations from you tonight, that'll go to me and my other co-chair, Ermiyas. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And the second focus group is the police department's budget and structure issues. And
I see Max.
I see Max here.
Mm-hmm.
Hey there. I'm Max Socol, a Silver Spring resident, co-chairing the second subgroup of our task force looking at the budget and structure of the department. Glad to be here. We have a wonderful subgroup. We have public health experts and folks who have been part of the criminal justice system in our group. Our charge is to analyze the budget and police department structure from the standpoint of racial equity and the county's commitment to racially equitable outcomes in policing. At our current stage of things, we've zeroed in on several different types of police activity where we see from MCPD data as well as outside analysis racially inequitable outcomes, and we are matching those activities back to the budget to come up with proposals to change how the department funds or structures those activities. That's where we are.
Okay, thanks very much, Max. Focus Group 3 is looking at the police department's operations and programs. And again, who do we have here?
I'll be speaking, Mark.
Right. Yeah, I see Chris. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Bolton. I'm co-chair of Focus Group number 3. We are looking at training, de-escalation, cultural competency within the police department, whether institutional racism plays a part in the administration of policing, and just a few other focus areas. But we've made some good progress. We meet a lot. We have a great group with a wide variety of people, ideals that help guide our that are guiding our way. And ELE4A has been a great asset for us, and that's where we're at right now. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, Chris. Group number 4, I actually know who's going to be speaking for that, and that topic is alternatives to policing in jail, and I believe Edmund Morris is here and can give us an overview on that.
That is correct. So, hi, again, Edmund Morris, co-chair. We're looking at alternatives to policing and incarceration. Think of it this way. Public safety is not the same thing as policing, the same way that public health isn't the same thing as medicine. And a lot of the public safety issues that get addressed by police also have things that root somewhere else. And so what we're looking at are the other programs, the other departments, the other ways to intervene in those individuals and communities that don't have the resources they need for a quality of life that reduces their likelihood to commit crimes, and also looking at some of the things that are criminalized and maybe don't require a criminal or a carceral response to them. So that's where we are at the moment, and we have a lot of programs in the county that are very promising. We just need to figure out how to make them work better together.
Okay, thanks, Edmund. And again, please start posting your comments and questions in the chat box, and then we can start to get to them. So our 5th group is looking at social services, crisis intervention, health issues, and the like. And Simone Walton is the co-chair of that group, and she'll be giving an overview of what they're looking at there.
I think I might be doing it, Mark. I'm Carlean Ponder, the other co-chair for the group. So it's going to be really easy because a lot of what we've been doing was captured by the county executive's preliminary statements. We pretty much all agreed that too many of the county's social services are sort of relegated to police, particularly when you're talking about mental health calls, mental health issues. And while the county has a lot of services, we received that in the report that everybody different representatives put together prior to the task force coming together. Not everybody is aware of all of the services. Things don't operate cohesively, and at the end of the day, we still have one system, which is 911. And it doesn't matter what that is. You know, it's your cat in the tree. You know, somebody's having an emotional outburst. You know, there's a homeless person, you know, urinating on a sidewalk. Our solution is 911. So we're reimagining where people have different options, and we will have appropriate personnel who will be able to service all of those needs. As I recall, the New York Times focused on Montgomery County in an article about a year ago, and I believe it was about 4% of all calls to our Montgomery County Police Department actually involve violence. That's a fraction. So, you know, we're working towards coming up with solutions where our police can be police and other issues are addressed by the appropriate professionals.
Okay, thanks very much, Carlean. Okay, I think now we're going to field questions. Come in chat, or if you want to raise your hands. I'm not sure if we can handle that too, but that's another option. So again, we want to hear, it could be your experiences with policing and public safety in the county. In particular, if there are issues and recommendations that you have that you would like to feed into any of these 5 focus groups that we're looking at, and we'll be developing recommendations, issues we may have overlooked that you think are critical to the 5 areas as well. This is all part of the process by which we're gathering information in a variety of ways to feed into what we think will be the strongest set of recommendations we can give to the county executive and to county residents in our report in January. So Bernice or Caroline or Ashley, can you monitor the chat group there?
Yes, I am active, Mark. I am awaiting either questions, comments, suggestions to come in through my queue.
Hi.
So as a reminder to the group, please feel free if you want to make a comment, send a chat. You can send it either to myself, Caroline Sturgis, Bernice Mary Q. North, or Dr. Ashley Burns. We're monitoring the chat box and we will call on you.
Sorry, I'm unmuted. I do see a comment in the chat box from, okay, I'm going in order here. Karen Marichu, and then Susan Curran. So we'll go in that order. Karen, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The comments that I made are that what stands out to me is disparity in responses by race, particularly with Brown and Black residents. I'd like to know what is the percentages by races of those who took the survey as compared to the percentage of residents by race currently living in the county. I noticed that there were not any questions by race regarding trust and likeliness of contacting police for assistance now or in the future, and why or why not that person taking the survey would contact or not contact the police. That information I feel would be very helpful to understand and to measure and to use for measurements of trust to establish a baseline measurement so that we'll be able to determine whether or not we're making any progress in the area of racial equity. There needs to be ways to measure racial equity process. Also, I wanted to mention that gender options and race were limited, and I feel that that may have been a deterrent for some residents to take the survey. So if you could respond to some of the questions that I have, I would appreciate that.
I do understand, Karen, that there is another person who's not a member of the task force that also has a question. Just for the sake of time, would you mind if we get to her question first, and then if we have time, we can get back to some questions from the task force members themselves if we have some extra time. Is that okay?
Sorry, yes, I thought you explained the process, and so I was just following what the process is.
Right.
Maybe other people that are curious for the answer, not just me asking the question.
Right.
Who are not on the task force.
Right. That's true. Let me, because we don't have a whole lot of questions at this point. Let me get to. Oh, okay.
So Bernice,
yes.
I think Ashley was going to jump in and
yes,
provide
I do see
a response on that.
Excellent
Question.
Okay, great.
Hi, good evening. So as Ms. Sturgis noted, this is something that we're also very interested in as well. And so we've asked for additional analysis. So what you saw today was very preliminary summary data. And so we've asked for an additional analysis that actually compares the numbers received from the survey against the demographic profile of the county. Given that the most recent census isn't out yet, I believe that it's going to be compared against ACS estimates. What's really important to note, though, in Ms. Sturgis's presentation tonight, though, is that 16% of the 6,500 respondents chose not to identify a race or an ethnicity, and approximately 9% chose not to identify a stated gender. And so we don't want to assume anything about people who chose not to designate a race, but in some ways that 17% would, if evenly distributed, would account for some of the gaps that we may see in that summary data that is currently available right now.
If I could just add too, this we got a very healthy response, 6,500 people in the county responding to the survey. From the start, we never pretended this is a randomized survey, and as political polling might do or something like that. That's hugely expensive to do that. So we take everything with a grain of salt. Nonetheless, we have 6,500 responses. We are going to be trying to break down the responses by race and ethnicity too, and to see what differences it may be when we look at it that way. And So it's one piece of the puzzle of, trying to get a sense of what the county residents are thinking, along with the work the task force is doing to try to reach out both to county agencies and the public, as well as research in the field to develop the recommendations.
And then to speak to the second part of the question, that is the very interest of focus group one that's looking at 911 and 311 call data. And so the co-chairs and the members of that group, they've been talking to community members, and one of the very first deficiencies and needs assessment items they found was the need to understand if people are fearful of calling the police, calling 311, calling for any county service. And so that group is really, really interested in hearing from the community on that issues, but already is really focused on making sure that all county services are accessible by languages that are well informed to the community. And so I believe that you'll see many recommendations specifically addressing community members who may currently not feel comfortable utilizing county services, including 911 or 311. So I think that that's a really important point, and we're really excited to see the work that Focus Group 1 is doing in this area. Thank you. I believe that answers the first two questions, Bernice.
Okay, I will jump in, and I see that Susan Karen, I believe, was next.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for doing this. I'm a contractor with SAMHSA, which is the federal agency that deals with behavioral health. And they actually are promoting an evidence-based model called Crisis Now. You could look it up, and some of you may know it. And I would suggest that you contact the founder, David Covington, about it. And it's pretty simple. It's three components. One is if someone's in crisis, they need somebody to call. And rather than 911, we're going to be outrolling the 988, which is sort of suicide prevention in crisis. And rather than a dispatch, it's actually like air traffic control. The person holds on to that person till they're safely landed somewhere. The second component is you need somebody to come out to you sometimes. And now it's the police, but you could have these mobile units with these two social workers or a peer come out, and they can resolve a lot of things. And then the third thing is to get them, sometimes they need some place to stay. And right now we use the emergency departments. And just as the police are inappropriate for this, the emergency departments aren't appropriate for this. People go there and they wait and they get turned away. So it's having these three components, and for the landing place, making it peer friendly, somebody who's been through that experience, making it trauma informed. So this has been done in Phoenix, Atlanta, Washington State. Phoenix is a very conservative community. They did it because it saved money. Police love it because they don't have to stand on the wall waiting for people to get intake. They just go off and leave. So it's not reimagining a concept. It's actually been implemented. So it's called Crisis Now. And the founder is David Covington, and he came to speak to SAMHSA. He's wonderful, but it's a model that's being used and is evidence-based.
Can I jump in here?
Of course.
So I just want to say that this is something we're really interesting. We actually met with one local group that does a community response program in Prince George's County in Baltimore. And we met with the folks from Cahoots, which runs a response program out of Portland. And we have money in the budget, and we're looking to reconfigure our current response team, which is basically one team, which is not enough to deal with the county, and I don't think is adequately resourced. So we're looking at these models and are going to implement something along the lines of, having a way of providing a responder who is not an officer, but a responder who's trained in the field of the problem they're responding to. So we'll look at this group as well and what kind of program they've structured.
Cahoots is number 2, and there were 3 stages now, but they do number 2.
Thank you.
I don't know if Group 5 has any thoughts on what Susan had offered before we move on.
Absolutely, yes. We've talked about both Cahoots and Crisis Now in Focus Group 5. We are very interested in having people be able to call a number, whether we're continuing to use 911 because that's what everybody knows, but there's appropriate, dispatch training, and then there are the appropriate professionals available to actually go out and service those calls, or whether we're going to re-educate the public on a different number, it's fine. But we're huge proponents of having non-police responders available, particularly when it's somebody in a vulnerable situation involving mental health or just emotional distress. I talked in my committee about the shootings in Montgomery County of Robert White in 2018, and we saw the shooting of Fanon Burhi in 2020 by Montgomery County police officers. Both of those men had mental illness. And I continue to believe that those were unwarranted police shootings, and I would like to see that our county do everything possible to prevent such things from occurring again.
I see.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to
I think someone from Focus Group 4 had something to add to that as well.
Yeah, so, wait, hold on, there's a video. There we go. So we had also been looking at some of those in terms of some of the county's existing programs that could be expanded. So, for example, there was a proposed restoration center that might occupy that space 3, that's somewhere safe to go, which would be both a self-referral and sort of a police drop-off for the person to be triaged and to be safely handled by qualified professionals in those fields there. And in addition to some of the wraparound services we have for youth that could be expanded to an adult population. So we are taking a look at those types of things and are happy to know that there's a vibrant conversation around it nearby.
I'd like to say also. Hello?
Go ahead, Bishop.
Yeah, I would like to say also at group number 4, what we're also looking at in reference to a safe space is, of course, bringing the community to take ownership of community and creating a safe place. So being able to have that communication before there is an interaction with the police department and calls. So creating that safe place where those consultants or counselors can actually have communication and cross-connection relationship with community leaders within the community and create that safe place as a precursor.
Thank you.
Okay, Bernice, I see in the queue the Cara Morello has a comment, question.
Hi, yes, it's a comment and a question. I've read that there's been a study, or rather there's been recent incidents of police departments sort of reducing services to domestic violence or family violence centers that align with the Black Lives Matter movement. And also I know that family violence centers tend to be pretty defunded in times of economic distress. So my question is, in terms of family services and services that affect women, has there been a discussion to decouple resources from the police with either family violence centers or sexual assault response centers? For example, reallocating funds to provide direct cash assistance to family centers or to victims in distress, particularly because government bureaucracy can take a while when rapid need is necessary. This is also especially crucial for undocumented people who cannot report violence to the police due to fear of retaliation or deportation. And also, I guess my follow-up question is there a possibility to redirect resources to mental health services to those experiencing trauma from either family violence or sexual assault in the county, and particularly recommending reassigning rape kits to health officials possibly instead of leaving it in the hands of the police, finding restorative justice programs to handle sexual assault, family violence situations, also job training for people, for partners who have been out of the workforce and need financial independence, anything that can be decoupled from the police to empower victims of violence or assault to be independent again.
Thank you, Kara. Those are excellent points. It sounds like that maybe either group 1 or group 4 could respond to that, if any, unless anyone else has any thoughts to what Kara has suggested. Is anyone from group 4? I mean, Edmund or Bishop, if you have any thoughts on that, what Kara has said, or Marco or Ermiyas.
I won't lie, we have spent a lot of our time taking a look at the perspective of the public safety and policing as it affects the people that are in custody, and a little bit less on some of the people that may have been affected by those actions. We haven't taken as close a look as we might like at the way that police funding and police activity is related to some of those safe spaces, the shelters, the family services, those things. We can certainly add that to our list of questions for the consultant team to help find us, get data on. But the idea of where to move some of those other services, your suggestion about having the rape kits handled by HHS and things like that, if anyone else has other ideas of to services that are currently handled by the police and other departments they might do well to go to, that one's actually very fascinating. That might be a thing that could work its way into some of our further conversations.
Thank you, Edmund. I am going to bring on our police chief, Marcus Jones. I noticed he sent me a chat in response to Crisis Now. So police chief, I want to give you a couple of seconds to address that. And while you're on, twofold, there is a separate question in my chat box regarding police representation on this task force. So if you would be kind enough to comment on the Crisis Now and then also comment on representation from your department on this task force.
Yes, thank you, Carolina. Good evening to everyone. I just wanted to note that we looked at and are continuing to look at the Crisis Now model. We have been doing that with our Health and Human Services, and we also did that with the conglomerates of the hospitals in Montgomery County, and we attempted to obtain a grant in order to begin that program in the county that I fully support. I think it is a perfect model for Montgomery County, and Dr. Kroll from HHS feels the same. So we'll continue to pursue that because we think that is a win that would, as Susan had noted earlier, all of the things she noted is right on point. So I just wanted to stress that that is happening. And yes, we do have each of our assistant chiefs from all 4 of our bureaus are a part of this reimagining group as participants to provide some insight to the actual reimagining public safety task force. So thank you all for your work as well. Thank you, Caroline. And hello, Bernice.
Okay, thank you, Chief Jones. Let's see, so Bernice, in my queue, I see that there is a question from Timothy. I'm sorry, I don't have Timothy's last name.
And I also have a comment from Robert Barkin as well. I don't see Timothy's, but I see Robert Barkin's.
Would you like me to speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah, if Timothy's not ready.
Hi. Have you looked at the optimal relationship between the police and the schools, especially related to school resource officers?
That is definitely clearly a hot button issue that many of the focus groups have touched on in some way. And I want to say, I think group 2, the police budget folks have dealt with it. But in terms of your question, I think group 3 might be the group to offer some feedback on your answer. And if any of the focus groups have something to add, including group 4. Okay, I see some notes. Yeah. So if anyone from group 3 can chime in on that, because that is a very popular hot button issue that has been thoroughly discussed.
Maria Lynn here. I am the co-chair of Focus Group 3. With respect to SRO, we are trying to keep up with the times. And things seems like there are some developments with respect to SRO and its elimination. So as far as the focus group is concerned, we are in support of the elimination of the school resource officer program. So I am, and much of my group is eager to hear what your thoughts are with respect to SRO, its merit or lack thereof, what you all think we should do with it.
Speaking to me, well, the evidence seems overwhelming that there's more usage against children of color in SROs, and that the better resource the better path may be to have mental health and other professionals take the role that SROs have. Now, I know Chief Jones feels differently about this because he thinks, and I acknowledge that there are many good things that SROs do, but in the sum, it seems that the better path would be to utilize police in different ways rather than directly in the schoolroom.
And if I could chime in real quick before anybody else comments, this is Chris Bolton. I'm the other co-chair, and the group's position in support of removing the SROs is because especially with kids of color, when teachers at the schools are having a difficult time and they feel they can't control the situation, they want to turn it quickly into a law enforcement action instead of trying to expand their options. And they use the SRO just to say, well, we're frustrated with this kid, so we're going to turn the cops on you, and you got to go or you got to go home. And if the student doesn't want to go home, instead of the teachers trying to explain to them, they go, hey, either he leaves or he gets arrested. And then that's a tool that just gets turned on kids more often than it needs to be.
Let me just add, we are also aware that this issue is being discussed at various levels in the county. It's been interest at the county council in looking at this issue, the school system itself doing an assessment of, how effective it is based on the goals of the program and what they're trying to accomplish. So we view the task force as part of this broader mix of discussion going on in the county. We hope we can come up with some strong recommendations based on evidence that can be part of the conversation in the coming year or so as decisions may be made about the future of the program.
I'll jump in here. We're actively engaged in discussing the program, and we're awaiting the recommendations or the input from the school system, which is primary. But I think some of the concerns are certainly legitimate. There is a sense that the police handle situations that other people don't want to handle or aren't comfortable handling. And again, it's another example of this really should be handled by the police. I do think that weapons need to be handled by the police. I would not ask anybody who's not equipped for that to confront somebody with a weapon. And, I wouldn't want to put them in that position. But I do think for a lot of this other stuff, there are real questions about how we do this. When I was on the council, I always felt that we needed to put more counselors and school psychologists in the schools. We failed to meet any of the, I won't say industry metrics, but any of the professional metrics for how many I don't mean guidance counselors for college. I mean counselors for human beings who need help, and school psychologists. We don't meet those metrics. And so our kids don't get the kind of mental health support that they should get. And we, I think, way underestimate particularly the impacts of poverty and what poverty does to the home life. I feel this way strongly because I was a teacher. And in my years of teaching, you could see the impact of poverty and what happens in families that are bedeviled by this, and the effect on children. And it is just one of those bad things, another example of something that instead of dealing with the underlying issues and helping people, it's like when things get bad, it becomes a police issue. So I'm looking for a way to re-envision this. We've got state responsibilities that under state law we have to meet, but it's not clear we have to meet them with the program exactly the way it is today.
Okay, well, while everyone's jumping in on things, let me just go ahead and throw a couple additional cents on that. So the first thing, as has been alluded to, 98%, according to the work group's report, of the SRO policing actions were instituted by someone in administration. This is an MCPS problem that is then weaponizing the police department that happens to be present. But that's part of a larger thing with the school system tending to disproportionately discipline and harshly discipline Black and brown students just across the board. That's a different piece of the puzzle. But to the thing that Executive Elwick was just talking about, that idea of having people in place to alleviate some of these other external stressors, the high school wellness programs, which are operated out of, I believe, Northwood, Wheaton, and a couple of other schools in the county, are examples that we've had the good fortune to talk with some of the people involved with and have looked at with our work group looking at alternatives that have a lot of those services available, and it doesn't require going through administration. It doesn't require going through the disciplinary process. They're just open and available. So we have even here already some things that we could use to address some of those problems in the other schools. But the SRO program is unlikely to be holding on to enough money by itself, even if it is dissolved, for us to be able to transfer that into doing more of those things.
Okay. Joanna Silver, you had a follow-up comment regarding SRO. I think that's that's the area you're working on within Group 3. Is that my understanding? Joanna, are you on? Okay, I'm not sure she's muted. She had asked to provide. Joanna, are you on? Can you hear us? Okay, she's having audio issues. Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah. I don't see her, Bernice.
Okay, yeah, she said she just sent me a message of audio issues. Then I will, we will come back to it. As you can see, this is clearly a very robust discussion on SROs. And so we definitely are be working on that. And we'll definitely keep you posted, through our public meetings regarding the steps we're taking regarding the SRO recommendations. I did, Caroline, you said there was another individual whose last name didn't catch.
Yeah, before we go there, it looks like, I think I saw Joanna Silver just join back. So I think we're going to give her an opportunity if you want to unmute yourself, Joanna.
Great. All right. Then we got a few more questions popping up, which is great.
Joanna, were you able to unmute?
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that, Joanna.
Right,
we'll try
no problem. She's having a message just one. Okay, no problem. So you said it was an individual named Timothy. I didn't catch the first name.
Yeah, there was a Timothy Young. Is Timothy Young still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Great. My question, I don't know if this is too far ahead of everything that is being developed right now, but when it comes to the term defund the police and everything along that lines where everything's being discussed is budgets and money, I think the thing that I really like is numbers. And so when it comes to the idea of reallocating funds from police to other areas, is there an idea or any proposals kind of floating around for how much money or anything along those lines will be reallocated? Is there anyone who might be able to speak on that at all?
Okay, I'm looking.
If I could start off with a response to that, I think, to my mind, the issue shouldn't be about money and setting up a percentage, but rather looking at structure and looking at operations and looking at how we handle problems. You know, we at the task force, and I think everyone in the county wants to figure out what is a more effective, what is a more compassionate, what is a less racist way to achieve public safety, and what would that look like? And once we get a sense of what we think that looks like, then we can start to do the math and say, how much would it cost? What kind of transfer of funds would be necessary and the like. So I think it's better to try to assess, you know, where we want to be going and then see, is the money there? If it's not, where does it come from and the like. So, that's the general direction that we're trying to take the conversation.
Can I amplify that? Because this has been an issue that we also are talking about as we go into the budget. I think one thing people have to understand, and the New York Times did this really amazing graph maybe 6 months ago about how officers spend their time, and Montgomery County was one of the places that was cited in that graph, and it was very detailed as to how the day breaks down. Montgomery County doesn't, we don't have death squads. I don't have a bomber program that I can just cancel and say, if I cancel these programs, I free up these resources. Officers in the course of their day may deal with a person who's drunk. They may deal with somebody who's got a mental health issue. They may deal with a homeless person. And they may not deal with any of them on one day. They may deal with all three of them on another. So taking those responsibilities away from the police doesn't necessarily mean that you free up a whole lot of time or you free up a whole lot of people, because there aren't people who are singularly focused on doing those things. And this is where defunding gets a lot more complicated. So we're looking at what we can move to other more appropriate service providers. And if it saves us money, it saves us money. I think the more important question, to kind of build on what Mark Maurer said, is we just have to do this right, whether it's policing or whether it's the other services. And it should not be dependent on whether or not police funding gets cut. It ought to be dependent on our will to address these problems and come up with solutions. So hopefully there's some money that gets saved when we move things around. But even if there's not, we've got to address the other things.
I don't know if Group 2 had anything to add. I'm not sure if Max or Brenda or Pat or anyone from the group can add to that as well, since they're focusing on budgets. I'm not sure, because my Zoom function, I can't tell off the top of my head if they're here. Because I think as Max mentioned, they're at this point they're kind of focused on, budgets are moral documents, so they're really focusing on trying to get the moral compass of the budget first before getting into what things to reallocate. What's going to be reallocated really depends upon the racial equity aspect of it all, and they're in the stages of trying to kind of sort that out and then look at the financial aspect afterwards. So if I'm incorrect in any of that Group 2, please let me know, but that was my understanding. So with that, I'm going to move on unless I have overlooked. I think I see one. Let's see whose name I saw next. I saw Mike Mage. Now I see his notes. Mike, if you could focus on, I do see some suggestions in your message. So if you can focus on that and perhaps explain why you're making the suggestions that you're offering, because they're good ones. Mike, if you're still on.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mike. Yes,
right.
Thank you.
Okay. Based on roughly 60 years of following law enforcement, amongst other things, here in the county, and the past 20 with a great deal more time, and seeing police culture in many contexts, I think police culture needs a total overhaul. It needs a complete retraining by non-police department retrainers, because, you know, a culture which is quasi-military, it is built on peer pressure, group pressure, us versus them, esprit de corps, or whatever you want to call me. And we have seen that in their chat rooms, as well as in their comments on the street, as well as in their not intervening to stop bad conduct on each other's parts. And that's only half the problem, because the state's attorney is also part of law enforcement. But when the state attorney overcharges, when they take the law in their own hands, as happened in the Wheaton Plaza killings and on an earlier incident, or in the Rockville High School sexual harassment, when they decide someone is a bad actor, so to speak, and then they try to kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, as we saw in the above incidents. I think that if a person cannot be charged constitutionally, you should not go out of your way to try and find a way to get that person anyway. And I think the state's attorney needs some retraining also. I think that's enough for now for me.
So I know Group 3 has worked on the issue of police culture, and Chris and Maria Lynn, I know Scott was the go-to person for the police culture research and analysis. So if you would like Scott to speak, I know he can provide some great feedback to Mike's suggestion.
Scott, this is Chris. If you're on, I would be glad if you would expand on his questions and suggestions, because I know that these are some points you hit right on the head.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Mike, no, I agree with you 100%. Culture is really an important area, and we have made a number of recommendations so far. We've developed several recommendations, and one of them is we need to look not just at training of officers, but training of first-line supervisors. You know, what kinds of messages are they giving? What are they encouraging? What are they rewarding? How are they addressing misconduct on their watch? The other thing is, the other question we raised is, if officers, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about getting off bystander training, where if an officer sees another officer that's where there's misconduct, maybe they give a racial epithet or they're using excessive force, are they willing to speak up about this? And in other industries, like, for example, the airline industry or the nuclear industry, where one incident can be catastrophic, what they've done is they've developed mechanisms where you report incidents to a third party, where it's anonymous, so that people feel more comfortable and willing to speak up about stuff like that. And I think the question is, you know, how are our officers encouraged to speak up, and how and rewarded for doing so? So I think you're spot on, and we are looking at that, and there's several recommendations that I hope will be useful.
I'd like to add something, if I could.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problem is systemic, having to do with the justice system itself. You know, a lot of times officers will pile on charges so as to help the state's attorney negotiate a better plea bargain. That way, not take responsibility for any kind of abuse that officer may do, because, you know, you might be a defendant might be threatened with years of jail time, depending on his interaction with the abusive officer. So that's also a problem that happens within the justice system. So it's deeper than just the state's attorney. It's the way our justice system works in terms of assuming liability. As soon as any side assumes liability for any wrongdoing, then there is a conflict, an internal conflict.
And Sydney Collins had a feedback related to what Mike and Bruce had touched upon. So Sydney, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm a lifetime Montgomery County resident, and I just wanted to speak a little bit about the systemic roots of the police in general. And I kind of wanted to offer a macro level perspective of defund the police as a tool towards abolishing police and prisons. Just full stop. And, I hold this belief, and I've held this belief for many years now. And I'm really excited that this task force exists. And I really hope that this is not the be all end all of reimagining public safety in the county. But I did want to offer some history of police departments, just so we understand, like for those of us who don't know the history of police departments, they are direct descendants of slave patrols, which were literal deputized bands of white supremacists who were tasked with terrorizing Black people. And if you Google slave patrol badge, you'll see what I mean. And then if, aside from that horrific and well-documented lineage, which I think should be automatically disqualifying of the police as a public service, there is no other public service that amasses a body count so high with no accountability. And not to mention that most reforms that have been suggested by police departments themselves, like diversity trainings, internalized bias, cultural competency, all of that jazz, body-worn cameras, they don't do anything to improve police behavior. And this is actually scientifically proven in several studies. In fact, actually, our neighbor, DC, the Metropolitan Police Department, in January 2017, I believe, they partnered with the lab at DC to run a study to analyze the effect of body-worn cameras on police behavior. And the conclusion that they came to was that it's statistically insignificant or null, which means that it doesn't affect their behavior either positively or negatively. They just spent money on body cameras. And then other studies of internalized bias and diversity trainings have yielded similar results. And so, all this is to say that as a resident of Montgomery County, I want to encourage us to reimagine public safety, like in a way that completely abandons the existing framework of police and prisons. And like, I don't bear any ill will towards, the individuals who are currently serving as correctional or police officers. Like, I just think that they cannot serve our society in those roles. Like, that role does not have a place in a just society as I imagine it. And so, I have to say, like, that's why it's a little disheartening, to say the least, when I hear, all due respect, County Executive Elrich, like when I heard you in the first meeting, I watched it in preparation, and part of my preparation for this forum, when I heard you say that you're never, and you said it so flippantly too, that you're never comfortable with defunding the police. I just really invite you to consider the irrefutable fact that defund the police and police and prison abolition are extremely well-researched policy demands that originate from experts in the field. And I encourage everyone to explore their work. And like, I want to acknowledge, and I want to close by saying that I know that this might seem like a tall order, but from everyone, I listened to all of your introductions, I listened to all of your backgrounds, every single person on this task force, and I think every single person who has joined us tonight is like incredibly intelligent, courageous, experienced, motivated, to do what is necessary to achieve truly transformative justice. So let's be creative. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Well said.
Well said. If anyone has any feedback to that, okay, just want to make sure.
Thank you, Sydney. Bernice, I do have one in the queue from Katie Stouse.
Excellent. Okay.
Hi. Thank you. This is Katie Stouse. I'm in subgroup 1. We're looking at 911 calls. I had put my comment in before the last couple of speakers, but I think it's directly related. Just in terms of funding and some of the comments that have already been made, I think we've talked in part on the fact that there are certain services that require funding, like mental health services, services for the homeless, et cetera. And that's one huge important part about what we've been talking about in our group on the concept of what to do with police budget. But the other piece is that there is active harm done by police. And the only way you can change that is you can't only fund other things. You have to have less of the harmful thing. And so saying that, well, maybe we don't have to take funding away from police, but we just need to add funding into other categories seems to overlook the fact that there is evidence in Montgomery County and in Maryland of active harm to communities through policing. And so that's one of the things we've been looking at in our group. And I think it's important that we continue to look at those two sides about, if we're talking about defunding, it's yes, getting other services, but very important to actually take away the over patrolling, the over policing, the harassment of communities. That's it.
Just looking in the chat here for additional questions. Caroline or Ashley, if you have any. Yours, I'm just looking.
Carlean.
Yes. Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say something I think in line with the last two comments. In our committee, Focus Group 5, we're talking about crisis response. I mean, really our theme is to reimagine the concept of first responders. We've talked a lot about making police, considering police as part of a team of first responders. Rather than being the one group in which we have decided to vest our powers in, or to vest all power in as a community. Let's reimagine what it means to have, police at the table alongside mental health, therapists, alongside peer support, mentors from, different communities. Including immigrant communities, language communities. Having police as just part of a community of first responders that includes outreach teams for homelessness. I mean, they're just part of that fabric of the community. They don't have all authority and power vested in them. So let's reimagine that for our communities in terms of keeping us safe.
Thank you. You got one, Bernice?
Yeah, well, I do see, I think I missed this. Edmund had some feedback regarding Bruce's comments.
I might be able to
suggestions that they're working on.
Happening there. The really short version is that one of the things we've been looking at with alternatives is basically moving away from a system that focuses on primarily punishment and crisis intervention to one that focuses on maximizing the viable use of all of the other options we have, including, maybe changing the way that some problems are perceived and handled. And this kind of falls into that space where everyone has been talking about, having different response teams, having community agency and ownership, but also introducing a requirement that in order to escalate it to police involvement or to arrest or to prosecution or to incarceration, that there has to be a compelling reason to move it up that chain instead of having police and incarceration be the default, that you have to have the right conditions to divert away from, which has been a lot of the area that we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks is how do we change what the default options are?
Okay, thanks, Edmund. Bernice, I think I have one final one before we look at wrapping up. If that's okay, it's Albert Tacona. Is he still on? Well,
hi, yes. I'm still here. Yes. Hi. Hello.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't sure what this was in regards to. I think I made like two comments I think earlier. But one, Well, I guess my first quick question wasn't so much important, but I was curious about in regards to the SRO program, how where would I be? Where would one who was interested be able to find more information or updates, like on like what like recommendations it would be taken to remove that? Because a story that I've heard, I personally related to is in that teachers do have a tendency to want to jump to discipline rather than finding an alternative method with helping a student that may just feel alienated in their in their own school. So that was just one thing I just wanted to know in case somebody else wanted to learn more about that, maybe a website or email, I guess. So, and go ahead.
Okay, sure. I was going to say there is a couple of efforts ongoing regarding the SRO program. The school is conducting an evaluation. And from my understanding, I believe their report will be finalized in January. So the recommendation that comes out of the school board and CPS, I would assume there you would be able to go on their website to find out. Other conversations that's happening local with council, should also be able to look on a county council's website for that information regarding the work of this task force and the discussions that are happening. It will all be included in the recommendations that get released with the final report. And we are still on track of having that report available by the middle of January of 2021.
2021.
I would just like to make a really quick comment, excuse me, because Caroline, you had mentioned the deadline. We have had a discussion as Work Group 4 in regards to the deadline. And in order to provide a deep and complete product through recommendations and proposals, we do not believe that mid-January is sufficient enough. I mean, this data that we're getting now is so far along into the process, and the span of the different areas and intercepts that we need to focus on does not provide us enough time to do an effective job. So I wanted to share that with you, and I hope that County Executive Ehrlich and the County Council members will consider extending the amount of time so that we will be able to do this properly. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Karen, for that comment, and we will review that. So looking at the time, we're down to 4 minutes left. I want to thank everyone for their comments, and with the remaining time left, please feel free to continue to provide your comments in the chat or questions. We are recording all of the comments, and they will be made available to the task force as well as the county executive. So we just want to ensure that your comments will not be lost, but we are capturing them. With that, I believe we are, Mr. County Executive, if you want to provide us any closing remarks in response to what you've heard tonight. Oh. Mr. Executive, you are on mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Mark. You're on mute.
Yeah, fixed. Mute is gone.
Okay.
So what do you have, about 4 minutes? Is that your time frame? Yeah. So I'll try to be reasonably quick. First, to the very last comment, I'm not averse to extending in order to get a better product. I mean, we're trying to get some stuff done so it can be built into the budget. Maybe there are things where we can get interim recommendations where people have, a higher degree of closure on some things or certainty that we could look at early and then, get additional things a little bit later. But I'm open to an extension, not a long extension, but some extension. I'm really grateful for all the comments that were made tonight. there's a conversation we really haven't had, which I think is important, and somebody touched on it, the notion of a just society. And I'll just say we don't live in one. And I'm not telling anybody anything they don't really know if they think about it at their heart. As a school teacher, like I said, I saw the effects of poverty every day. And expecting people to deal with the struggles of being employed, making enough money to put a roof over your head, having a rent you can afford so that you're not putting all your money out into rent and have no money to feed, clothe, provide medical care or any of the other things for your kids is ultimately an unstable and unhealthy situation. And that a lot of what we deal with is the result of underlying and fundamental injustice. If people face discrimination forever and don't feel at a young age, and I was amazed at how young kids in elementary school accept the sense of lack of possibility because of their sense of where their place in the world is and was going to be, that does not work out well for society. And so we have a lot of work to do beyond policing. And that's, part of it is unwinding from the police the things that they shouldn't be doing. I think the question about evaluating what you do and where is it worth putting the effort into, or where do you need to put the effort, is something I hope comes out of this task force in terms of, getting us to think, do you really need to be doing this? How important are doing some of the things that people do right now? And when I was teaching in college, one of the books we used, and I recommend it for good reading, is called The Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove, and it was a history of policing. And it's not just the slave patrols, but they were used to keep workers in line and to suppress worker movements and labor movements very early on in colonial society. So there is lots of history and there's lots of entanglement, and there's no simple way to separate the police from everything else in society. They are part of it, and the problems they deal with come out of society, and they're not strictly in response to policing. There are a lot of the problems in response to things that we don't get right every day. And so I continue to focus on some of the other things outside of policing, and I'm going to continue to do that. And I hope, that we get recommendations here that let us steer policing in a more humane direction, in a more appropriate direction. And I think that, judging by the conversation tonight, people are getting a lot of input and putting a lot of serious thought into it. And the reason I created this in the first place was to get the ideas of other people. If I just wanted to do what I wanted to do, I don't need a committee. You could just do stuff. But I believe that decisions like this need to be nourished by information and input from the people who are participants in society and experience it for good or bad, and who have thoughts about, what they would like to see and what would make them feel more comfortable, what would make them feel they were living in a more just and humane environment. So that's why this committee was created, to provide that kind of input. And we're going to look really closely at what folks have to say. Is also one of the reasons why the voting members of the committee are citizens, because at the end, I did not want everybody able to vote. I didn't want people from the government able to vote. I wanted the folks in the community to be the ones that would vote on recommendations. So I'm happy with what I've heard, and I'm encouraged that the committee is getting a wide range of opinions and is going to have some real tough discussions, and I think will make really intelligent recommendations to us. So thank everybody for coming. Thank the committee for all the work you're doing. I can tell by the committee members' comments that you are deep into this and pondering your task with all the weight that it really has. And say thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for summing that up. Let me just add, on behalf of the full task force, we really appreciate the work of all the members of the task force and all the members of the public who've been here tonight. I think it's been a very rich discussion. It will enhance our thinking and directions that we consider in the coming months or so on the task force. I think most of you know there's a website for Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Task Force on the county website, and please check in there periodically if you don't already do, and you could keep up to date with what we're doing. And finally, if there are any follow-up thoughts and ideas or suggestions you may have following this, by all means, send us a communication, and we very much welcome whatever input you can provide. So thanks very much, and we'll look forward to being in touch. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Good night. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Through all that to find what we need has been a challenge, but